Well, for more analysis on the U.S. jobs report for July, I spoke to Anthony Chan, former economist at JP Chase. And I asked him what these latest jobs figures say about the overall health of the U.S. economy.
With everything that we know now, we know that consumer spending was clearly the star performer in the latest calendar quarter in the GDP numbers. And now with these tariffs going on, it's going to slow down consumer spending. These employment numbers are also telling you that they're a little bit weaker than they were last year. So we should see that overall real GDP will also be slowing down. Now, there's some good news in these numbers, and you pointed some out, the labor force participation rate going up. We saw that the labor force increased by 370,000. What does that mean? It means we're starting to bring in people that weren't even thinking about working into the labor force. And that's why wage pressures are not as serious as some people might think, given the unemployment rate at levels that we haven't seen in close to 50 years.
Now let's look at the jobs themselves, because a lot of part-time jobs came back 10 years since the global financial crisis. So what sort of changes are we seeing in terms of the quality of these current jobs?
I think what we're seeing is the quality is getting a little bit better. But again, remember that now they're having to go deep into the labor force, or at least people that have less skills. So the quality of the people that are coming in are not as good. But a lot of firms are starting to think about training the workers as they bring them in. But there is no doubt that right now, with the levels of unemployment that we're seeing, we're not getting the best quality workers. The National Federation of Independent Small Business has told us that one of the major problems that many of our small businesses and even medium-sized businesses are having is getting a good quality worker to fill those job openings. That is why when you look at the JOLT survey of the employment numbers, they're telling us that we have more job openings out there than people that are unemployed. And the reason for that is that the quality of the workforce that's left without a job is much to be desired.
And so which are the industries that really suffer from us having this skills gap in the U.S.?
Well, I think that what they have to do is what they've done in the past when the unemployment rate reaches these very low levels, and that is they have to basically spend money to train these workers, because these workers are not coming to work with the skills that are being demanded by the employers. And some employers are just simply throwing their hands up and simply not hiring because of that. Now, we're going to see some industries losing some jobs, and hopefully those workers that have those skills can be placed in other sectors. But by and large, we still have a shortage of the kind of skills that employers need to fill those positions.
Now, we know that with the Trump tax cuts, the expectation was that the companies would then use this money to expand and increase hiring. But what are we actually seeing companies doing?
We're actually seeing that they're not investing as much as the expectation. And the reason for that is quite clear. A lot of businesses, CEOs are telling us that because of all this trade uncertainty and uncertainty with regard to the supply chains, they're simply frozen, and they're not hiring, and they're not investing as much as they normally would have.
What's your outlook in terms of perhaps one bright spot and one major challenge that we should be paying attention to in the U.S. labor force in the second half of the year?
Well, I think in the second half of the year, we'll continue to see the economy growing at a 2% or so pace, which, by the way, not bad, because we're doing fine. And the labor force, all we need is about 100,000 jobs just to absorb the natural growth in the labor force. So if we're creating jobs at 164,000, maybe a little weaker than we were creating last year, but it's still certainly enough to absorb those people coming into the labor force. And by the way, we're even bringing in additional people that weren't even thinking about working. We saw the discouraged workers coming down. We saw the U6 unemployment rate, which some people say is the real unemployment rate, going down from 7.2% to 7%. So that is encouraging. And in fact, one of the things that I get very excited is that we saw people with less than high school education going back into the labor force. That tells me that employers are so desperate that they're bringing these individuals in. And I'm very excited to say this. I grew up in the inner cities, and giving them, or at least trying to give them, the skills that they need to fill those positions. And that is a very positive development.